Vextai had seen many worlds burn. In his 300 years as a diplomatic observer for the Rillan Confederacy, he had witnessed the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations, but nothing had prepared him for what he would see on the third planet of the Sol system. The mission started like any other. The Galactic Council had received distress signals from a remote star system. The signals were weak and broken, but the message was clear. The Kethmori had arrived. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Kethmori. They were a hive-mind species that consumed everything in their path. They had destroyed 47 civilizations in the past 1,000 years. When they came to a system, they killed everything that lived and took all the resources. No one had ever successfully fought them off. The Council's response was standard: send a small fleet to document the destruction and save any survivors they could find. Vextai volunteered for the mission because he was curious about these humans. The species was new to the galaxy's attention. Their radio signals had only been detected a few centuries ago. From the early scans, humans seemed primitive. They still used chemical fuel for their ships. Their weapons fired metal bullets instead of energy beams. Their technology was at least 500 years behind the galactic standard. When the Kethmori arrived in their system, everyone expected it to be over quickly, but the distress signals kept coming. Vextai stood on the bridge of the observation ship as they dropped out of hyperspace near the human homeworld. What he saw confused him. The planet was still there. It was still blue and green and full of life. Around it, pieces of destroyed ships floated in space. But they were not human ships. "Are those Kethmori vessels?" asked Captain Morden, the mission. Commander Vexti checked his scanner. Yes, at least 12 destroyed hive ships. This was impossible. New species always fell to the Kethmori within days. These humans had been fighting for over 2 years. The communication system crackled to life. A voice spoke in the human language, which Vextai's translator converted instantly. "Unknown vessels, this is Earth Defense Command. State your business or prepare to be fired upon." Captain Morden activated the diplomatic channels. "This is the Galactic Council vessel Harmonies. Light, we are here on a humanitarian mission." There was a long pause. Then a different voice spoke. "Council ship, this is Commander Deho of the Earth Defense Force. We appreciate your offer, but we're a bit busy right now. We've got incoming Kethmori forces in 6 hours. Vextai studied the human commander through the video link. Deho was tall for his species, with short black hair and scars across his face. His uniform was torn and dirty, but his eyes were sharp and alert. This was not the look of a defeated species. "Commander, we're here to evacuate survivors," Captain Morden said. "Our ships can take 50,000 civilians." Deho laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Survivors? We've got 8 billion people down here and we're not going anywhere. But if you want to help, we could use some medical supplies." The transmission ended. Captain Morden stared at the blank screen. "They refuse evacuation," Vextai noted in his report. "This behavior is unprecedented. All previous species have accepted Council assistance when facing the Kethmori." "Perhaps they don't understand the threat," the captain suggested. But Vextai wasn't so sure. He had heard something in the human commander's voice. Not fear, but determination. These creatures were planning to fight. 3 hours later, Vextai was on the planet's surface. He had requested permission to observe the human defense preparations. To his surprise, Commander Deho agreed. "Just stay out of the way," Deho had said. "And if you can't keep up, find a bunker." The human military base was chaos. Soldiers ran everywhere, carrying weapons and supplies. The air smelled of fuel and metal and something Vextai couldn't identify. Fear, maybe. Or excitement. Vextai followed a group of human soldiers to their transport vehicle. It was a rough, angular machine that moved on wheels instead of hovering. The soldiers inside were young, most of them barely adults by human standards. One of them, a female medic, named Sojin, looked at Vextai with curiosity. "You're the alien observer, right? First time seeing humans fight?" "Yes," Vextai replied. "My species prefers diplomatic solutions to conflict." Sojin smiled grimly. "Well, you can't negotiate with the Kethmori. They don't want to talk. They just want to eat everything." Another soldier, young and nervous, spoke up. My name's Wu Jin. I've been in 3 battles so far. The bugs are tough, but they're not smart. They just charge forward in waves. Bugs? Vexatai asked. That's what we call the Kethmori. So Jin explained. They look like giant insects and they fight like them too. No individual thinking, just follow the hive commands. Vextai had studied the Kethmori extensively. They were efficient killers, with natural armor and razor-sharp claws. Their hive mind made them perfect coordinators. They never made mistakes or got confused. How could these humans speak of them so casually? The transport stopped at a defensive position on the edge of a city. Vextai saw his first human fortification. It was nothing like the energy barriers and shield generators used by advanced civilizations. Instead, the humans had piled concrete, metal, and dirt into walls and trenches. They had placed their primitive projectile weapons at strategic points. This is where we make our stand, Deho said, arriving at the position. The bugs will come from the north. We funnel them into the kill zone and hit them with everything we've got. What if they break through? Wu Jin asked. Then we fall back to the next line and do it again, Deho replied simply. That's how. We've been fighting for 2 years. Give ground when we have to, make them pay for every meter. Vextai was shocked. You've been fighting the same enemy for 2 years? Longer in some sectors, Deho said. They hit us hard at first, took about 30% of our colonies, but then we learned how to fight them. Turns out, being part of a hive mind has some disadvantages. Before Vextai could ask what he meant, alarms began sounding across the base. Soldiers grabbed their weapons and ran to their positions. In the distance, black shapes appeared in the sky. Here they come, Sojin said, checking her medical supplies. Stick close to me, alien. Friend. This is about to get interesting. Vextai watched in fascination and horror as the Kethmori dropships landed beyond the human fortifications. The ships were organic-looking, like giant seeds. They split open, and thousands of insect-like creatures poured out. The Kethmori were exactly as Vextai remembered from his studies. 2 meters tall, covered in natural armor, with 4 arms ending in blade-like claws. They moved with perfect coordination, advancing in precise formations. Fire! Deho shouted. The human weapons opened up. Vextai had expected the primitive, projectile weapons to be ineffective against Kethmori armor. But the bullets were special. They punched through the alien carapaces and dropped the creatures in their tracks. Armor-piercing rounds, Wu Jin explained, firing his rifle steadily. Took us 6 months to figure out the right metal composition, but we got it. The battle was unlike anything Vextai had ever seen. The Kethmori advanced with mechanical precision, but the humans fought with controlled chaos. They used explosives to collapse buildings on advancing enemies. They fired from hidden positions and then disappeared before the aliens could respond. When a section of the line was overwhelmed, the humans didn't panic. They fell back in good order, firing as they went. New defensive positions had already been prepared behind the first line. How do you coordinate without a hive mind? Vextai asked Sojin as she treated a wounded soldier. Training and trust, she replied without looking up from her patient. Every soldier knows the plan and every soldier knows their job. We don't need someone else thinking for us. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the attack had been repelled. Hundreds of Kethmori bodies lay scattered across the battlefield. The humans had lost soldiers too, but they had held their ground. As Vextai helped Sojin carry wounded soldiers to the medical station, he realized something had changed in his thinking. When he arrived on this planet, he had expected to document another Kethmori victory. Instead, he had witnessed something unprecedented. These humans, with their primitive weapons and crude tactics, had done something no other species had managed. They had fought the Kethmori to a standstill, not just once but for over 2 years. Will they attack again? Vexatai asked Deho as the commander surveyed the battlefield. Tomorrow, probably, Deho replied. Or the day after. They always come back, but so do we. The human commander walked away to check on his soldiers, leaving Vextai alone with his thoughts. He looked up at the stars, where the Council fleet waited safely in orbit. His people thought they were here to rescue the survivors of another Kethmori conquest. But Vextai was beginning to understand that they might be witnessing something else entirely. Perhaps the birth of the first species to successfully resist the galactic destroyers. He activated his recording device and began his first report. Day 1 of observation. The humans continue to fight. Their methods are primitive but effective. They show no signs of surrender. I am beginning to suspect that the Galactic Council may have underestimated this species. 3 weeks later, Vextai found himself in a place the humans called the Meat Grinder. It was a star system where the war had been raging for 8 months without pause. 5 planets, all of them contested. Every day brought new battles, new casualties, new horrors. Vextai had requested to embed with a frontline unit. Against all logic, Commander Deho had approved the request. "You want to understand how we fight?" Deho had said. "Then you need to see the worst of it." The worst of it was a moon orbiting the system's second planet. The Kethmori had tunneled deep into the rock, creating a massive hive complex. The humans were trying to dig them out, one tunnel at a time. Vextai rode in a transport ship with Wu Jin's unit. The young soldier had been promoted to sergeant after his previous commander died in battle. Now he led 20 humans into the underground darkness. "First rule of tunnel fighting," Wu Jin explained as they descended into the moon's surface. "Never go alone. Always have backup. The bugs like to wait in side passages and attack from behind." The tunnels were narrow and dark. The air was thick with dust and the smell of explosives. Human soldiers moved through them in small groups, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. They spoke in whispers and hand signals. Vextai's species had excellent night vision, but even he struggled to see in the complete blackness. The humans seemed to navigate by sound and instinct. They knew when danger was near before their equipment could detect it. "Contact front," someone shouted. The tunnel erupted in gunfire. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness like lightning. Vextai pressed himself against the tunnel wall as bullets flew past. The sound was deafening in the confined space. Through the chaos, he saw the Kethmori. They came scuttling down the tunnel on their 4 legs, their claws sparking against the rock walls. Their eyes glowed in the darkness like angry stars. The humans met them with controlled violence. They fired in short bursts, making every shot count. When the aliens got too close, the soldiers used knives and clubs. They fought hand-to-hand in the narrow space, grunting and cursing. One soldier, a demolitions expert named Kyung Ho, pushed past Vextai carrying a large pack of explosives. "Getting too crowded in here," he shouted. "Time to redecorate." Kyung Ho ran toward the advancing Kethmori, pulling pins from grenades as he went. Vextai realized what the human intended to do. "Stop," Vextai called out. "You'll kill yourself." Kyung Ho turned and grinned. "That's the idea, bug friend. Tell my wife I kept my promise." The explosion collapsed 50 meters of tunnel. The Kethmori advance stopped, but so did Kyung Ho's life. The other soldiers paused for a moment of silence, then continued forward. "He had a family?" Vextai asked Wu Jin. "Wife and 2 kids," Wu Jin replied, stepping over the rubble. "They're safe in the core worlds. That's why he did it." Vextai couldn't understand. His species valued individual survival above all else. The concept of dying for others was alien to him, but to these humans it seemed natural. They emerged from the tunnel 6 hours later. Half of Wu Jin's unit was dead or wounded, but they had cleared 3 tunnel complexes and rescued 40 human prisoners. Above ground, the battle continued. Vextai watched from a command post as human artillery pounded Kethmori positions. The aliens responded with their own organic weapons, launching acid spores that ate through metal and flesh. "How do you keep fighting like this?" Vextai asked. Colonel Haye Jin, the base commander. She was a small woman with steady hands and tired eyes. "Because the alternative is extinction," she replied simply. "The bugs don't take prisoners except when they want to study us. And trust me, you don't want to be studied by them." Jin pointed to a sniper's nest on a nearby hill. "See that position? That's where Sergeant Minsu is set up. He's been there for 3 days picking off bug commanders. Hasn't slept, barely eaten. But he keeps shooting because every bug leader he kills saves human lives." Vextai watched through binoculars as the sniper fired. 800 meters away, a Kethmori fell. The shot was impossible by galactic standards. The human had compensated for wind, gravity, and the target's movement with primitive optical equipment. Your weapons are crude, but your soldiers are skilled, Vextai observed. We adapt, Heejin said. That's what humans do best. The bugs have better armor, better coordination, better technology. But we learn faster. She showed Vextai a tactical display. 3 months ago, the Kethmori controlled this entire system. Now we've pushed them back to 2 planets and this moon, not because we're stronger, but because we think differently. How so? They're a hive mind. Every decision comes from the top. If we disrupt their command structure, the lower units become confused. So we target their leaders first. We use psychological warfare. We make them afraid. Vextai was skeptical. The Kethmori don't feel fear, they're incapable of it. That's what we thought too, Hyejin said with a cold smile. But watch what happens when they can't contact their hive ship. The next attack came at dawn. But this time, the humans were ready with something new. As the Kethmori forces advanced, human electronic warfare units activated jamming devices. The alien formation suddenly became disorganized. Individual Kethmori stopped and looked around, confused without their hive mind guidance. The human counterattack was brutal and efficient. They struck at the confused aliens with concentrated firepower. Artillery shells exploded among the Kethmori ranks. Snipers picked off the larger specimens. Infantry units flanked the scattered groups and destroyed them piecemeal. Within 2 hours, the Kethmori attack had been completely routed. For the first time since Vextai had been observing, the aliens actually retreated in disorder. Impossible, Vextai breathed. Nothing's impossible, said a new voice. Vextai turned to see a medic approaching. It was Sojin, the woman he had met during his first battle. Her uniform was covered in blood, but she was smiling. I thought you were on Earth, Vextai said. Requested transfer to the front lines. Sojin replied. Too many good soldiers dying out here. Figured I could do more good where the fighting's worst. She sat down heavily beside them, exhaustion clear on her face. Just finished a 12-hour surgery marathon. Saved 18 soldiers. Lost 4. Not a bad day considering. Vextai was amazed by her casual attitude toward the carnage. How do you cope with so much death? You focus on the ones you save, Sojin said. Every life preserved is a victory against the bugs. Every human who goes home to their family is a win for our species. Over the following days, Vextai witnessed more examples of human determination. He saw engineers working around the clock to repair damaged equipment. He watched pilots flying missions with malfunctioning ships because every fighter was needed. He observed civilians volunteering for dangerous supply runs to keep the front lines equipped. The humans had turned war into a science. They studied every Kethmori tactic and developed countermeasures. They learned from every defeat and incorporated those lessons into their strategy. They adapted faster than any species Vextai had ever encountered, but the cost was enormous. Every day brought new casualties. Every battle left families broken. The humans carried their grief like a heavy weight, but they never let it stop them from fighting. We're losing people faster than we can replace them, Wu Jin admitted during a quiet moment. He had been promoted again after his company commander was killed. Now he led 300 soldiers, most of them younger than himself. Then why continue? Vextai asked. Because giving up means everyone dies, Wu Jin replied. At least this way some of us might survive, our children might have a future. That night, Vextai transmitted his report to the Galactic Council. The humans continue to resist despite overwhelming odds. Their casualty rates would have broken any other species, but they seem to grow more determined with each loss. They have developed tactics specifically designed to counter Kethmori advantages. Most disturbing, they appear to be winning. The response from the Council was swift and skeptical. Observer Vextai, please verify your data. No species has ever successfully resisted the Kethmori for more than 6 months. Your reports suggest impossible outcomes. But Vextai's data was correct. The humans were not just surviving, they were pushing back. They had turned the Kethemori advance into a grinding stalemate, and slowly, system by system, they were driving the aliens out of their territory. The meat grinder continued to turn, but increasingly it was alien bodies being ground up in its gears. The humans had learned to fight monsters by becoming something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that refused to die quietly. As Vextai prepared for sleep in his bunker, the sound of artillery echoed across the battlefield. Somewhere, out there, humans were dying for their species. But somewhere else, Kethemori were discovering that their age of easy conquest was over. The primitives had learned to fight back, and they were very, very good at it. The retreat began on a Tuesday. Vextai would remember that detail for the rest of his life, because it was the day he learned what humans meant when they talked about hell. The Kethemori had brought their full fleet to the Sol system. 47 hive ships, each one carrying 1,000,000 warriors. The largest military force the aliens had ever assembled. The human defense fleet met them in open space and was destroyed in 6 hours. Fall back to the inner system, came the order from Earth. Command: all units execute Withdrawal Plan 7. Vextai didn't understand what that meant until he saw it happen. The human military began an organized retreat across 3 star systems. They abandoned their forward positions, destroyed their own bases, and pulled back toward their homeworld. But this wasn't a panicked flight. It was calculated, methodical, and brutal. "We're not running away," explained Major Minho, the veteran officer commanding Vextai's transport. "We're making them pay for every kilometer." Minho had fought the Kethemori for 3 years. His face was a map of scars, and his eyes held the 1,000-yard stare that Vextai had learned to recognize in human veterans. But when he spoke to, his soldiers, his voice was calm and steady. "Listen up, people," Minho told his troops as their ship fled the outer system. "Half of you are new, so let me explain how this works. We fall back, we make them chase us, and we bleed them white in the process. Every ambush, every trap, every improvised explosive takes down more bugs. By the time they reach Earth, they'll be so weakened that our home fleet can finish them off." One of the new soldiers, a young woman named Yu-Jin, raised her hand. "Sir, what if the plan doesn't work? What if they break through?" Minho's expression didn't change. "Then we die fighting, but we take as many of them with us as possible." Vextai was horrified by the casual way humans discussed their own deaths. But the soldiers just nodded and went back to checking their weapons. To them, dying for their species wasn't a tragedy. It was just part of the job. The retreat took them through the Centauri system, where humans had been mining asteroids for 2 centuries. The Kethemori expected easy conquest. Instead, they found every mining station rigged with explosives, every supply depot booby-trapped, and every asteroid belt turned into a maze of hidden weapons platforms. "They're learning to hate us," observed Communications Officer Yu-Jin as she coordinated the mining station evacuations. She was thin and pale from working 20-hour days, but her hands were steady on the controls. "Good," Minho replied. "Hate makes people stupid. The bugs are starting to take this personally instead of treating it like pest control." Vextai watched the battle for the Centauri mines from the bridge of a human destroyer. The ship was ancient, by galactic standards, built with crude metal armor and primitive computers, but it moved with deadly grace through the asteroid field, striking at Kethemori ships and vanishing before they could respond. "Captain Taewoo has been fighting in these rocks for 8 months, Minho explained. "He knows every hiding spot, every weak point, every route through the field. The bugs might have better ships, but this is his home." The battle lasted a week. When it was over, the humans had lost 3 mining stations and 2 destroyers. The Kethemori had lost 16 hive ships and countless warriors. The aliens advanced, but they were already showing signs of strain. The next system was Alpha Centauri, where humans had built their first interstellar colonies. The Kethemori expected another easy victory. Instead, they found a population of 50 million humans who refused to evacuate. "We're not leaving," declared Governor Dongwu when the military tried to organize an evacuation. He was an old man with white hair and steady hands, and he spoke for every colonist on the planet. "Sir, we can't protect you here," Minho argued. "The bugs will overrun the planet in days." "Then we'll make those days cost them," Dongwu replied. "Every human who dies fighting here is one less bug that makes it to Earth. My grandchildren live on Earth, Major. I'm not going to let those monsters reach them if I can help it." Vexatai watched in amazement as an entire planetary population prepared for war. Factory workers converted assembly lines to produce ammunition. Teachers became communications operators. Even children helped by carrying supplies and messages. The defense of Alpha Centauri lasted 3 weeks. The Kethmori threw wave after wave of warriors at the human positions. The colonists fought them from every building, every street corner, every rooftop. They used hunting rifles and farming equipment and improvised explosives. When the military positions fell, the civilians kept fighting. When the cities were overrun, they retreated to the countryside and continued the resistance. Every human who died took several Kethmori with them. Vextai embedded with a group of civilian fighters led by a woman named Haisun. She had been a school teacher before the war. Now she was a guerrilla commander, leading raids against Kethmori supply lines. "My students are evacuated to the inner system," she told Vextai as they prepared an ambush. "Safe for now. But if we don't stop the bugs here, nowhere will be safe. So we fight." The ambush was successful. 15 Kethmori transport vehicles destroyed. Hundreds of warriors killed. But Hyasun's group lost half its members in the attack. She mourned them briefly, then began planning the next raid. "How do you keep going after so much loss?" Vextai asked her. "Because the alternative is worse," she replied simply. "If we give up, if we stop fighting, then everyone dies. At least, this way, some of us might survive." The fall of Alpha Centauri came on the 19th day of the siege. The last human resistance pocket was overrun at dawn, but the Kethmori had lost almost half their invasion force taking the planet. Their advance toward Earth had become a crawling, bloody slog. The retreat continued to the outer edge of the Sol system. Here, humanity made its final stand before Earth itself. The remaining fleet, barely 200 ships, faced the 30 surviving Kethmori hive ships. Vextai watched the battle from the bridge of the battleship Sol. The ship's captain, Admiral Sangmin, was a legend in the human fleet. He had fought in every major battle of the war, and his ship showed the scars of dozens of engagements. "Today we make our stand," Sangmin announced to his crew. "Behind us is Earth. Behind us are 8 billion humans counting on us to hold the line. We will not fail them." The battle was desperate and chaotic. Human ships, outgunned and outnumbered, fought with suicidal courage. They rammed Kethmori vessels when their weapons failed. They used their dying ships as weapons, steering them into enemy formations as they exploded. The Sol herself was crippled in the fighting. Half her crew was dead, her main guns were destroyed, and she was venting atmosphere from a dozen hull breaches. But she kept fighting, firing with secondary weapons and launching boarding parties at damaged enemy ships. "Sir, we need to abandon ship," the first officer reported to Admiral Sangmin. "The reactor is going critical." "Negative," Sangmin replied, calmly. "Set course for the lead hive ship, full ramming speed." The Sol's final charge took out the Kethmori flagship and 2 escort vessels. Admiral Sangmin died at his post, steering his ship into the heart of the enemy fleet. But his sacrifice, like so many others, bought precious time. The battered Kethmori fleet limped toward Earth, but they were no longer the unstoppable force that had begun the invasion. Vexatai was rescued from the Sol's wreckage by a human medical ship. As he recovered from his injuries, he watched the final preparations for Earth's defense. The planet's population had turned their world into a fortress. Every city was ringed with defensive positions. Every civilian had been trained to fight. "We've lost over 300 million people in this war," admitted General Kyung-soo, the officer in charge of Earth's defenses. "But we're still here. We're still fighting, and we're going to win." Vexatai wanted to believe him. But the Kethmori were still coming, and Earth's defenders were outnumbered 10-1. "How can you be so confident?" Vexatai asked. General Kyung-soo smiled grimly. Because we're not the same species we were 3 years ago. We've learned to fight monsters by becoming something the galaxy has never seen. We've become human. As Vextai looked out at Earth, he began to understand. The retreat across 3 star systems hadn't been a defeat. It had been a forge. Every battle, every loss, every sacrifice had shaped humanity into something new, something harder, something unbreakable. The Kethemori were about to discover that their easy conquest had become something else entirely. They were about to face an enemy that had learned to turn hell itself into a weapon, and humanity was very, very good at using weapons. The gas came at dawn on the 14th day of the siege of Earth. Vextai was in a military hospital in what humans called Geneva when the alarms began screaming. Through the windows, he could see the sky turning an unnatural shade of green. Then the reports started coming in from around the planet. Biological weapon deployment confirmed in 12 major cities, announced the emergency broadcast system. All civilians in affected areas must immediately seek shelter in sealed environments. Dr. So Jin, who was treating wounded soldiers in the hospital, stopped her work and stared at the reports. "They're using plague spores," she said quietly. "The bastards are trying to kill the entire planet." Vextai had read about Kethemori biological weapons in his pre-mission briefings. The aliens could release engineered diseases that killed all carbon-based life. It was their standard method for clearing planets they wanted to colonize. No species had ever survived a full-scale biological attack. "How long before the spores spread globally?" Vextai asked. 72 hours, replied Colonel Yunji, the hospital's military commander. She was checking her weapon and preparing to evacuate the wounded. "Maybe less with the wind patterns." "Then Earth is lost." Yunji looked at him with the same expression he had seen on so many human faces during the war. Determination mixed with grim acceptance. "Maybe, but we're not going down without a fight." The evacuation of the hospital took 6 hours. Wounded soldiers who could barely walk insisted on carrying those who couldn't. Medical staff worked around the clock to prepare patients for transport to underground shelters. No one panicked. No one gave up hope. Vextai found himself in a massive bunker complex beneath the Swiss mountains. Thousands of humans had taken refuge there, along with essential equipment and supplies. The air was filtered and recycled. The walls were meters thick. It should have been safe. But Vextai knew that safety was temporary. The Kethemori spores would eventually find a way in. Then everyone in the bunker would die slowly and painfully. Emergency broadcast from Earth. Defense Command announced the bunker's communication system. All surviving military units are to implement Scorched Earth Protocol immediately. Civilian authorities are authorized to use any means necessary to resist enemy occupation. Vextai didn't understand what that meant until Dr. Tae Wan, the bunker's chief scientist, explained it to him. "Scorched Earth means we destroy everything," Taiwan said. He was a thin man with tired eyes, but his hands moved confidently as he worked on his research. "If we can't save Earth, we make sure the bugs don't get anything useful from it." "But that would mean destroying your own civilization." "Better than letting the bugs use our resources to kill other species," Taiwan replied. "Besides, we might have found a way to fight back." For the past week, Taiwan and his team had been working on something they called the countermeasure. They had taken samples of the Kethemori biological weapons and were trying to create a neutralizing agent. "The bug spores are designed to kill carbon-based life," Taiwan explained as he worked. "But they're also living organisms themselves, which means they can be killed." It was a desperate gamble. Human science was centuries behind the Kethemori, but they had advantages the aliens didn't expect. They were creative, they were desperate, and they were very, very angry. The first results came back positive. Taiwan's team had created a virus that attacked the Kethemori spores, but it was unstable and difficult to mass produce. "We need more time," Taiwan admitted to the bunker commander, General Jae Hyun. "At least another week to perfect the formula." "We don't have a week," General Jae Hyun replied. He was looking at reports from the surface. "The bugs are preparing for a full planetary assault. They want to finish this quickly." That's when the volunteers came forward. Lieutenant Yunji was the first. "I'll take the prototype to the surface," she announced. Test it in real conditions while you continue working. The prototype has a 60% chance of working, Taewon warned, and a 40% chance of making the situation worse. Then I guess we'll find out which one it is, Yoonji replied with a grim smile. 12 more volunteers joined her. They called themselves the Guinea Pig Squad. Their mission was simple: get to the surface, deploy the prototype countermeasure, and hope it worked. Vextai watched them prepare for what was almost certainly a suicide mission. They checked their equipment, said goodbye to friends, and wrote letters to family members they might never see again. But they didn't hesitate. They didn't doubt. They just did what needed to be done. Why? Vextai asked Yoonji as she loaded the prototype device into her transport pack. Because if we don't try, everyone dies, she replied. At least this way, we have a chance. The squad departed through a secret tunnel that led to the surface. Vextai watched their progress on the bunker's monitors. They moved through a landscape that looked like the end of the world. The sky was green with poison. Dead plants covered the ground. Nothing lived in the open air. But the humans kept moving. They reached their target, an old weather station on a mountain peak. From there, they could deploy the countermeasure into the upper atmosphere, where the winds would spread it across the continent. The deployment went perfectly. The device activated and began releasing Taewon's virus into the poisoned air. Within hours, the green tint began to fade from the sky. It's working, Taewon announced to the bunker. The countermeasure is destroying the Kethmori spores. But the victory came at a cost. 8 members of the Guinea Pig Squad died from exposure to the biological weapons. Lieutenant Yoonji barely made it back to the tunnel before collapsing. She spent 3 days in critical condition before recovering. Was it worth it? Vextai asked her as she recuperated. Ask me again when we win the war, she replied. The countermeasure spread across Earth in 72 hours. The Kethmori biological weapons were neutralized. The planet's atmosphere cleared. Humans began emerging from their shelters to find their world scarred but still livable. But the war was far from over. The Kethmori fleet was still in orbit, and now they were angry. They're preparing for ground assault, reported the orbital monitoring station. 47 landing sites across 6 continents. Estimated enemy strength, 15 million warriors. General Jae Hyun studied the tactical displays. Earth's remaining military forces numbered less than 2 million soldiers. The civilians could fight, but they were poorly equipped and inadequately trained. We're outnumbered 7-1, he announced to his staff. Conventional tactics won't work. That's when the humans did something that shocked even Vextai. They stopped fighting like a civilized species and started fighting like humans. The new strategy was called asymmetric warfare. Small groups of humans would attack Kethmori supply lines, communication centers, and command posts. They would strike quickly and disappear before the aliens could respond. They would use guerrilla tactics, sabotage, and psychological warfare. We're not trying to beat them in open battle, explained Major Dong-jun, the officer coordinating the resistance cells. We're trying to make them afraid to leave their landing zones. The strategy worked better than anyone expected. Human fighters operating in small groups began picking off isolated Kethmori patrols. They sabotaged alien equipment with improvised explosives. They attacked at night when the aliens were most vulnerable. More importantly, they began targeting the Kethmori hive mind network itself. The bugs communicate through bioelectric pulses, explained Dr. Taewon. If we can disrupt those signals, we can isolate individual aliens from the hive mind. Human. Scientists had learned to build jamming devices that interfered with Kethmori communications. When isolated from the hive mind, the aliens became confused and ineffective. They stopped working as a coordinated force and became just very large, very dangerous animals. The first successful hive mind disruption occurred in what used to be Tokyo. A human resistance cell activated their jamming device during a major Kethmori assault. The alien forces immediately fell into chaos. Individual warriors wandered aimlessly, unable to coordinate with their fellows. The human counterattack was swift and brutal. They destroyed 3,000 confused Kethmori in less than an hour. Impossible, Vextai breathed as he watched the battle reports. "Nothing's impossible," replied Captain Sang-ho, the officer assigned to protect Vextai. "Difficult, yes. Costly, definitely. But not impossible." Sang-ho had been fighting the Keth-Mori for 4 years. He had lost 2 fingers and most of his hearing to alien weapons. But he was still fighting, still finding new ways to hurt the enemy. "The bugs made a mistake," Sang-ho continued. "They assumed we were just another primitive species they could intimidate. They never considered that we might adapt faster than they could respond." Over the following weeks, the tide of battle began to turn. Human resistance cells, armed with hive mind jammers and countermeasures to biological weapons, began pushing the Keth-Mori back. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't predict or control. For the first time in their species' history, the Keth-Mori began to retreat. "They're pulling back to their landing zones," reported Orbital Command. "Several hive ships are preparing to depart." Vextai couldn't believe what he was seeing. The Keth-Mori, the unstoppable conquerors of the galaxy, were running away from a primitive species with crude wepo. 5 years later, Vextai stood in the Galactic Council chambers preparing to deliver his final report on the human species. The Great Hall was filled with representatives from across the galaxy, all waiting to hear about the creatures that had accomplished the impossible. The war with the Keth-Mori was over, not just on Earth but everywhere. For the first time in 1,000 years, the hive mind species had completely withdrawn from contested space. They had retreated to their home systems and shown no signs of expansion. The human conflict lasted 4 years and 7 months. Vextai began his testimony. "During that time, I observed 17 major battles, 43 minor engagements, and countless acts of individual courage. What I witnessed changed my understanding of warfare, civilization, and the nature of sentient life itself." The council chambers were silent. Every representative was listening carefully. The story of humanity's victory had spread across the galaxy, but few believed the reports. How could a primitive species defeat the Keth-Mori? "When I first arrived in human space, I expected to document another Keth-Mori conquest," Vextai continued. "Instead, I witnessed the emergence of something unprecedented, a species that grew stronger under pressure, more creative when faced with impossible odds, and more united when threatened with extinction." Vextai activated his holographic display. Images of the war filled the chamber. Burning cities, desperate battles, human soldiers fighting against overwhelming odds. The humans lost approximately 400 million people during the conflict. Entire star systems were devastated. Their military was outgunned and outnumbered throughout the war. By all logical analysis, they should have been extinct within months. "Then how did they survive?" asked Counselor Thexmar of the Vegan Collective. "They adapted," Vextai replied simply. "When their technology proved inadequate, they improved it. When their tactics failed, they developed new ones. When conventional warfare proved insufficient, they invented asymmetric strategies that the Keth-Mori couldn't counter." He showed images of human innovations, weapons designed specifically to penetrate Keth-Mori armor, jamming devices that disrupted the hive mind network, biological countermeasures that neutralized alien plague spores. But more importantly, they never surrendered. Even when facing extinction, they continued to resist. They turned their entire civilization into a weapon designed for one purpose: survival. "Surely the Keth-Mori could have overwhelmed them with sheer numbers," suggested Ambassador Kulan of the Centauri Republic. "They tried," Vextai replied, "multiple times. But humans have a saying, the harder you hit us, the harder we hit back." Each Keth-Mori escalation was met with human innovation. Each new threat became an opportunity for humans to develop new capabilities. He showed footage of the final battle, when human forces had not only repelled the Keth-Mori invasion, but launched their own counterattack into alien space. The humans developed the ability to disrupt Keth-Mori hive ships from within. They created infiltration teams that could board alien vessels and cause catastrophic system failures. They turned the aliens' own coordination against them. The council chamber erupted in discussions. Several representatives expressed disbelief. Others wanted to know if humanity posed a threat to galactic peace. That brings me to my final observations, Vextai said, calling for order. The question facing this council is not how the humans won, but what we should do about them now. He displayed current intelligence reports. Human ships were exploring beyond their home system. Human diplomats were making contact with nearby civilizations. Human technology was advancing at an unprecedented rate. General Sang Ho now commands the Earth Defense Force, Vextai reported. He has expressed interest in joining galactic civilization as an equal partner. The humans want to share their defensive technologies with other species. And if we refuse their partnership? Asked Councillor Vexthar of the Andromedan Union. Then, we may face the same fate as the Kethmori, Vextai replied bluntly. The humans have proven they can defeat superior forces through determination and innovation. They have also demonstrated remarkable loyalty to their allies. The choice is ours: partnership or potential conflict. Ambassador Youngie of Earth stepped forward to address the council. She was a small woman with gray hair and intelligent eyes. She spoke with quiet confidence. The people of Earth have no desire for conquest, she said. We have seen the cost of war, and we prefer peace. But we will not be anyone's subjects. We offer friendship to those who want it, and we ask only to be left alone by those who don't. What assurance do we have that humans won't become aggressive conquerors like the Kethmori? Asked Councillor Rextun of the Tauseti Alliance. Because we remember what it was like to be the victims, Youngie replied. Every human alive today has lost someone to the war. We know the pain of watching our worlds burn. We would never inflict that suffering on another species. Vextai stepped forward again. I can confirm that human society remains primarily defensive in nature. However, they have developed new military doctrines that could revolutionize galactic warfare. Their willingness to share these innovations suggests genuine peaceful intentions. Over the following days, the Council debated humanity's place in galactic civilization. Some representatives argued for immediate integration. Others wanted to maintain distance until human intentions became clearer. The debate ended when news arrived of a new crisis. The Zerian Empire, a militant species from the galactic rim, had begun attacking peaceful colonies near human space. 3 star systems had already fallen. The Zerions have demanded that all organic species submit to their rule, reported the emergency messenger. They claim to be implementing galactic purification. Within hours, the human response arrived. Ambassador Youngie stood before the emergency council session with a simple message. Earth offers military assistance to any species threatened by the Zerian Empire. We will deploy our fleet immediately to defend attacked worlds. Why would you risk your people for strangers? Asked Councillor Mordan. Because it's the right thing to do, Youngie replied. And because bullies only understand one language. The Human Defense Fleet, led by Admiral Jae Hyun, arrived in the EU contested systems within a week. Their ships were still crude by galactic standards, but their tactics were revolutionary. They used the same asymmetric warfare that had defeated the Kethmori. The Zerians expected conventional battles between fleets. Instead, they faced human infiltration teams that sabotaged their command ships. They anticipated energy weapon duels. Instead, they encountered kinetic projectiles that penetrated their shields. The first Zerion defeat came at the Battle of Kepler Station. Human forces, working alongside local defense militias, repelled an invasion force 3 times their size. The aliens retreated in confusion, unable to understand how their superior technology had failed. Impossible, breathed Councillor Thexmar as he watched the battle reports. Nothing's impossible, Vextai replied, echoing words he had heard from countless humans. Difficult, costly, but not impossible. The Zerion War lasted 18 months. When it ended, the aggressive empire had withdrawn to their home systems and agreed to non-aggression treaties with their neighbors. Once again, humanity had proven that technological superiority meant nothing against determination and ingenuity. The humans are rewriting the rules of galactic warfare, Vextai concluded. In his final report, they have shown that any species, no matter how advanced, can be defeated if they face opponents willing to sacrifice everything for victory. More importantly, they have proven that such dedication doesn't require giving up compassion or morality. To me, Galactic Council voted unanimously to offer humanity full membership. Earth became the newest member of galactic civilization, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. But Vextai knew that humanity had already changed the galaxy forever. Other species were studying human military doctrine. Defensive alliances were forming based on human strategic principles. The age of easy conquest was over. "What happens now?" asked Ambassador Young A as she signed Earth's membership charter. "Now you help us prepare for whatever comes next," replied Counselor Vexthar. "Because if there's one thing we've learned from watching humans, it's that the galaxy is full of unexpected threats, and we're going to need your unique talents to face them." Vextai smiled as he watched the ceremony. His people had sent him to document the death of another primitive species. Instead, he had witnessed the birth of a new age. The human war front had indeed been hell, but from that hell had emerged something beautiful. Hope that even the weakest could stand against the strong, that even the primitive could defeat the advanced, and that courage and determination could overcome any obstacle. The galaxy would never be the same. And perhaps, Vextai thought, that was exactly what it needed. As he prepared to return to his homeworld, Vextai received a message from his old human friend, Colonel So Jin. She was now running a medical school that trained doctors from dozens of species. "Thank you for telling our story," her message said. "But remember, the war may be over, but the work continues. There are always new challenges, new threats, new opportunities to help each other. The humans are ready. The question is the galaxy ready for humans?" Vextai closed his files and looked out at